Good afternoon, everyone. It is nice to see you at this summit. Some of you who know, I have recently stepped down as the president of the Board of Governors, having completed my second term. But one of the things that I was most proud of is working with our new president, Manuel Baca, our great Chancellor's Office staff, Linda Michalowski, Paul Feast, and others, in actually bringing forth this summit on veterans in community colleges. A couple of years ago, we decided that veterans were going to be a priority for this Board of Governors. And with Manuel's leadership and our Chancellor's Office staff, we have made that happen. And with your great work in the field, it looks to me, as I leave this office, like things are in very good hands for California veterans entering our community college system. So I was delighted to come here today when President Baca asked me to introduce our keynote speaker today, because just a few short days ago, our speaker was my personal representative in the California State Assembly. I happen to live in his district and actually got to know him first through his wife, Mindy Fletcher, who I worked with in Governor Schwarzenegger's office for a couple of years. I've gotten to speak with Nathan many times over the years on education issues, those affecting us in the state and in his and my area, San Diego. It's always been a priority for him. As you'll hear shortly, the issues of veterans are always on the top of his mind. So let me just tell you a couple things about my friend here, and I'm just going to read a couple little things from his bio so you get to know him. In 2007, Nathan Fletcher completed his service in the United States Marine Corps, where he worked as a counterintelligence, human intelligence specialist. On his last deployment, he served in the Horn of Africa region, traveling throughout Eastern Africa and the Near East. For his duty, he was awarded the Joint Service Commendation Medal and Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal. In 2004, he served 8 months in the Sunni Triangle region of Iraq. Among the awards he received for his tour are the Navy Marine Corps Achievement Medal with Combat V for Valor. We are very proud of Nathan Fletcher in my area of San Diego. I know all of us are proud of him for his leadership on veterans issues in the state. With that, the Honorable Nathan Fletcher.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you for having me. As a, I think by 4 days now, recovering politician, it's my honor to be here. You know, I had never run for elected office before. I came out of the Marine Corps and decided to run, and you'll have these really humbling moments kind of throughout the course of it. And I went through a whole campaign, and we got elected, and we passed a couple fairly high-profile pieces of legislation. And I was feeling great about life, and then I'll never forget introducing myself to a guy, and I said, "Assemblyman Fletcher, it's wonderful to meet you." And he said, "Assemblyman, huh?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, that's great, son." I said, "Well, thank you. I worked really hard." And he said, "What is it exactly that you assemble?" And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, you don't even know." And then every now and then, you will get recognized. It's not always maybe what you want. I was at the gym working out early in the morning, and this was in the height of the mayor's race. We had a lot of focus, and a guy kind of gave me that familiar look. And you know, it's 5:30 in the morning, and I've got a hat on, and he kind of looked, and I kind of looked back, and then a few minutes later, I went to the water fountain, and he came over, and he said, "Anyone ever tell you you look like that Nathan Fletcher guy?" kind of lifting my spirits early in the morning. And I said, yeah. I said, I get that sometimes. And he said, it must really piss you off, doesn't it? I said, I heard he's all right. You know, I don't know, maybe give him a chance. But I had, you know, one of the things I am very proud of in my time in the legislature is actually being the first combat veteran of the global war on terror to serve in the California legislature. And there will be many more to follow suit, but thank you. One quick story on that. I don't always get recognized as that either. I went to boot camp at Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego. I was a teenager and went and stood on the yellow footprints. And now I'm on the board of directors there. And I was there for a meeting, and I was lost, and I had my little map. And the buildings made no sense to me, the order and the numbering when I was in the military, and it hasn't magically imparted some great wisdom. And so I'm wandering around lost, and a drill instructor comes up to me. And if you ever served, I don't care how long ago it was you went to boot camp, when a drill instructor comes up, you kind of tighten up a little bit. You know, you get a little nervous, and you kind of tighten up, and you make sure your shoes are shined, you know, and he said, can I help you? And I said, I'm lost. And I had a little lapel pin on. He said, are you a Marine? And I said, well, yes, I am. I said, no longer on active or reserve status, but once a Marine, always a Marine. And he said, well, sir, if you're a Marine and you're lost, you must certainly be looking for the barber shop. And I said, no, Sergeant, I'm looking for the general's office. He got nervous. It was fun. But it was never a dull moment. But it was an honor to serve in the legislature. I look back fondly on the time that I spent there, and very excited about the opportunities for me moving forward in the private sector. But I just wanted to spend a minute. You know, I kind of want to start it off and acknowledge I'm not an education expert by any stretch of the imagination. Anytime someone says they're a legislator, that usually implies they're not an education expert, as all of you know. I don't have a scientific or medical background in mental health issues, and I know veterans issues to the extent that I served. And so what I share with you today is not meant to be education philosophy on what you should or shouldn't do, nor is it any scientific or medical practice of mental health treatment. It's just my experience. And I suspect you'll have a lot of people coming to your classes and your schools who in a lot of ways were similar to me. They served their country, they came out. I went to school before going to war, but a lot of them will come out after. And I just wanted to share with you a little of that perspective, and then just take questions, and we'll do my best to answer. One of the things I think that you really see a lot with veterans today, and none of these are true universally, but I think generally speaking it applies, is there is a little bit of sense of isolation with some of the veterans who are serving today. And I think part of this is just some cultural shifts we've gone through as a society. You know, in the aftermath of World War II, almost 10% of America had served in the military. There was a greater awareness, there was a greater sense. When it's almost 10%, the percentage of people who have a family member or a relative or someone who had served, today that number is below 1%. Less than 1% of our society today served in active or reserve capacity in the military, which makes it a little bit different. When you looked at elected representation, the United States Congress used to be 70% veterans. 70% of the United States Congress was veterans. Today, it's less than 20% of the United States Congress are veterans. Now, you can care. Some of the most passionate advocates for veterans never serve, so don't mistake that I'm saying that you have to be a veteran to care about veterans issues. But it does change things. I think I, along with a lot of veterans, were shocked and appalled over a debate over the GI Bill for the 21st century. I mean, I severed, pretty damaged some relationships I had with friends of mine who were members of Congress, who were on the wrong side of that issue from my standpoint. Because I said, you can send these people to war and you can't pay for their damn college? I mean, this is crazy. I mean, think of it, all we're saying is pay for their college. Or in the event they don't want to go, let them give it to their spouse or their kids. They earned it, it's theirs. And to hear an argument that says, well, we can't do that because we don't want veterans to have a bright future, we want them to stay in the military. I mean, it was offensive to those of us who served. And so I think in some ways you see, in a lot of ways, that this kind of sense of isolation, or this sense of, God, they just don't get it, coming out of people in the military. An example that we used a lot, we would say this a lot, and this is just from folks who were on the ground. I'll never forget when we were in Iraq, and people would say America went to war, and a lot of us who were serving said, well, America didn't go to war, the Marine Corps went to war. America went to the mall. Because if you go back and you look at the aftermath of September 11th, what was the message? The message was, go shop. Get on an airplane. Live your life. Don't be bothered, don't be worried. As opposed to times in our history where we said, we're all in this together, you need to buy war bonds. You need to pay, you need to do these types of things, and it was a very different message. I think that resonated out, that came out of what we were collectively going through as a society, that impacted our veterans. This election was the first time in 80 years, the first election in 80 years that neither president or vice presidential candidate of both major parties had ever served in the military. And here again, please don't mistake, you can care passionately about veterans and not having served, but these are the things that go through the minds of veterans when they see it. We had one candidate who was the first time, I think, in recorded history, where in the acceptance speech for his party's nomination, did not mention veterans one time. Not even a passing reference to veterans, to their health care, to their education, to bringing them home. Not a single reference in an entire speech. And so you see a lot of these things, I think, that come together to create a little bit of sense of isolation. Now, there are a lot of areas where we are doing much better. I think as a society, we learned the lessons of Vietnam. It is completely patriotic to disagree profoundly with the actions of your leaders. I don't think it's patriotic to blame the individual soldier. And as a society, we are doing such a better job than we did in the aftermath of Vietnam. I believe we have evolved and we've learned. I'll never forget a few times after returning from my second deployment, I was in Los Angeles at a dinner, and I sat next to Bill Maher, who was a passionate critic of both wars. And I've never had anyone be kinder, be more appreciative, or say, son, I want you to know how much I value and appreciate what you did for our country. He said, I don't like it, but you didn't make that decision, and I will take my issues up with those who made those decisions. Every time I meet a Vietnam veteran, I tell them that I am the recipient of a lot of thanks and appreciation. That is a course correction for how our Vietnam veterans were treated when they came back. And it's something that's intended for them, and you know what, that's a good thing. That is a good thing. And so I think that that is helpful in a way that we've done better. And there are a lot of committed organizations. There are wonderful organizations that are out there to help our military, to help their families. And I think the simple fact, I was talking to a couple of folks before coming up here, and I said the simple fact that we have an organization that says we want to better serve veterans. Right? We want to have an entire conference, we want to bring people in, we want to talk about it, and we want to learn how can we better serve veterans are the types of things that give hope and overcome some of those things that create a sense of isolation. And so I'm really grateful for the efforts and actions of all of you, because these are the types of things that makes a difference. So we're doing better in some ways. We do have a lot of work to go. And I don't know, particularly at the federal level, from a funding standpoint, we fully embraced or understood what it means to fight the longest war in American history. You know, the war in Afghanistan is the single longest war in American history. And when you plan and you prepare to go to war, you need to plan and prepare to take care of those when they come home. You know, we have a lot of veterans today who are surviving things that you probably should not survive. I read an interesting study that was talking about your likelihood, the percentage that you would be wounded in battle. And the percentage that you will be wounded in Iraq or Afghanistan is not far below the historic average of other major wars, minus the Civil War, because we were kind of both sides of that one. But it's kind of in par. The likelihood that you will die in Iraq or Afghanistan is phenomenally lower. And that's primarily due to advances in combat medicine and advances in body armor and protection. Now, the result of that is that you get veterans who are surviving things that no one in history has ever survived. And there's some debate about the mental ability to cope with some of these types of issues. And so you see a huge number of quadriplegics. You see people who have lost multiple limbs. You see people who have lost major functions of their body who are able to survive because of the body armor wrapping that you have and the fact that we control the airspace, and within minutes you can get life-sustaining air support in. Now, what does that mean for us as a society? That means we have a lot of veterans that are going to struggle mightily to readapt into society, that are going to have a difficult time functioning, and that we're going to have to pay for forever. You know, these are not things that you broke your leg gets set, you go on with your life, and we never have to worry about your leg again. These are things we're going to treat forever. When you're talking about mental health issues, a lot of those don't resurface for 10, 20, 30 years after the initial incident. And so I think we've really got to get our head around making this lifetime commitment to those who are serving. George Washington had a great line. He said, well, before I tell you George, I'll tell you my favorite line from Truman. He said, "The only thing that's new is the history you don't know." And I think he was right. And George Washington was a historical example of something that we face today. In the aftermath of the Revolutionary War, he said, "Future generations' willingness to serve will be directly tied to how they perceive previous generations were treated at the end of their service, because it's a statement of our values." And so what we do with our veterans today is not only the morally right thing for our veterans today, but it sends a powerful message to my two young boys. It says that as a society, we value service, and it's something we want to encourage. And I think this willingness to have people voluntarily enter into military service to risk their life for their country is one of the cornerstones of what makes us great. And so I think we have to take very, very seriously the obligation. And then I will stop kicking this drum. But if we as a country have the money to send you to war, once again, we have to have the money to take care of you. I know that the costs can be expensive, but relative to the cost of an aircraft carrier, it's not really that expensive. But it doesn't matter what the cost is. If a society, if you can't sustain the financial cost of caring for those that go to war, then don't go. Then don't go. But that has to be a part of the planning. And from a moral standpoint, if we have the moral authority to send you to war, then we have the moral obligation to care for you when you come back, because these are life-changing experiences. And I'll never forget, I don't know what grade it is, you read All Quiet on the Western Front, in grade school at some level. But I actually reread it. We were traveling between combat outposts in Iraq, and guys would have boxes of books, and I remember flipping through a box of books, and it was there, and I thought, boy, I haven't read that in probably 20 years. And it was interesting to read in a combat zone. But there was a passage that jumped out at me that really, really grabbed me. And I had just never thought about it. And it talked about an 18-year-old going to war, right? And how that year in a combat zone was 100% of their adult life experience, right? I mean, think about this for a minute. Now, I had a different experience. I was older when I went. I had worked for NGOs abroad. I did human rights and democracy building work. I had seen death. I had seen the developing world. I had seen violence. I had a better frame of reference for what's normal and what's not normal. I was married. I mean, I just had more life experience. I also had more life experience growing up. I grew up in a hard, scrapping, blue-collar family. My dad was a factory worker. I just had a culmination of life experience by the time I went that was greater. But let me paint for you the picture of, I would say, the overwhelming majority of Marines that we get in Southern California. The Marines of today are different. They are different. The Marine Corps will not take a GED. You have to have a high school diploma. The Marine Corps will not take you if you've committed a felony, even if you weren't convicted. The Marine Corps will not take you with any substantive drug use at all. And the Marines we're getting today are different. And a lot of the Marines you're getting today are coming out of suburban San Diego. They've lived a very sheltered life. You get kids that come to boot camp who have never been in a fist fight in their life. Now that's a good thing. I'm not encouraging kids to go fight, right? Don't tweet that I said kids need to fight. But think about that. They don't know any hardship. They know living at home with mom in Carlsbad. Where the greatest fear is, what happens, to the soccer team or something. It's a very different experience. So they come down to Marine Corps Recruit Depot, where we yell at them for 13 weeks. But that's it. We just yell at them. We don't do anything else. We yell at them. They go to Camp Pendleton. They get a little training. And then we put them on a plane and we drop them off in Iraq. And their first physical encounter of their life, their friends are dying. They're trying to kill people. You have a maybe 19-year-old kid whose first difficulty, whose first stress, whose first hardship is the guy that's his best friend dying right beside him. A 19-year-old kid who doesn't know how to process life, who shows up to the scene of a car bombing. Car bombings typically happen in civilian areas. You show up to the scene of a car bombing, the first thing you're going to notice is sandals everywhere because the people are blown out of their sandals. You're going to notice very small sandals for the children. And then you're going to begin to clean up the mess. I often ask people, what's the most afraid you've ever been in your life? What is the most afraid you've ever been in your entire life when you actually thought you were going to die? For most folks, you may not have ever had that experience. Maybe you were in a car accident for a brief moment. Maybe a really turbulent plane ride. But for most folks, that doesn't happen. Now imagine doing that every single day for a year. Every single day. You're taking mortars, you're taking small arms fire. The things that you have to do. And then we bring you home, we drop you off, and we say, go on with your day. I mean, literally, we bring you home and we drop you off. So when I came back from the Sunni Triangle region of Iraq, we got on the plane at Al Taqaddum Air Base, just east of Fallujah. We landed in Kuwait. I'm wearing the same clothes. At Kuwait, we get off. We went and had a pizza. We all got sick. We dumped all the rounds out of our gun into a bucket, and then we got back on the plane with our guns, and we flew home, made a couple stops along the way, landed in San Diego. I got off the bus and kissed my wife and my friends in the same clothes I was wearing when I started the day in Fallujah. My best friend, who for a year had been one of the machine gunners in the turret, and when you drive in Iraq, no car gets near you. You don't let a car get near you because of the risk of suicide bombers. And it just doesn't happen. You don't stop for stoplights. You don't stop for traffic. No car gets near you. And for a year, that is survival. That is what means you get to come home versus people that don't. My buddy gets in the car with his wife. He gets on the 5 North. There's an accident, and he's boxed in. He's surrounded by cars. He can't move. What does he do? He gets out of the car and he runs because he can't process or handle being surrounded by cars, because we just plop him back and say, have a good day. It's little things. I'll never forget the sensory overload of getting home and opening my closet to get dressed. I'd worn the exact same thing every day for a year. I had two pairs of it, and they were both identical. It was sensory overload. It was a difficult thing. Veterans who serve develop a morgue sense of humor. You know, where you will joke about things that are not funny to those who didn't serve. It's a coping mechanism. It's a way of dealing with it. But when you're around your buddies who have shared experience, who have been through the same thing, you can relate and you can talk about it. When you come home, you can't. I'll never forget, my buddy went 5 North, I went 5 South. We had a bunch of friends. We met for lunch. And I was older, better adjusted, had an easier time dealing with it. My buddy said, hey, did you ever see anything funny? What was the funniest thing that happened when you were there? And I told a really funny story. And I realized no one was laughing, because it wasn't funny to people who hadn't had that shared experience. And so what you find with a lot of veterans when they come back is that sense of isolation is compounded because they're just not going to talk to anyone about it, because you'll be judgmental. In their eyes, you'll be judgmental. You won't understand, you won't appreciate, you won't value what they went through and how they did. I sat at a dinner about 6 months ago, and I sat next to a World War II veteran, Iwo Jima survivor, and we started quietly talking and telling stories, and we talked for 45 straight minutes. He got up to go to the restroom. He got up to walk away. I looked at his wife, and she started crying. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, I've been married to him for 57 years. He's never talked about it once. She goes, he just met you. He doesn't even know you. And I said, but there's an element of comfort that comes from someone who had a shared experience. You won't tell anyone else. And you just have to accept that. But they will tell each other that happens. Another problem when veterans come back is life seems pretty boring. At times it seems inconsequential and boring. When the stakes are life and death, when those types of things that are happening, it is easy to kind of fall into a depression of it just doesn't really matter. When you have people that depend on you in order to live, when you're the leader of an effort that has these high stakes, it can be very, very difficult to come back. And that's where you see a lot of things you get with risky behaviors. You see a lot of motorcycle accidents. You see a lot of drinking. You see a lot of high-risk behavior because there is a fatalistic sense of, I went through that, I can do anything. And then there's just a general boredom sense. And you hope that you fill that in with some healthy activities that give you some excitement. But again, we're dealing with young folks that are dealing with a lot of issues and challenges. One thing I've long said, and I really wish we could figure out a way to do this. The whole notion, we've gotten better about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We have gotten much better. The stigma associated with it is waning. You know, in the early days, I had a job in the military. It was a little bit unique, and I had an extraordinarily high security clearance. And if you had to be polygraphed for your security clearance and you were treated for mental health, it would flag and create a problem with your clearance. And so you saw a lot of guys out of the Special Forces community who would never acknowledge that they were having these issues because they didn't want their security clearance. We're getting better at some of those types of things. But I think at its underlying point, as a non-medical, non-scientist, I just hate the name post-traumatic stress disorder. Because if I ask you who has a disorder, you're never going to admit you have a disorder. Especially when you're talking about Marines. You're talking about tough Marines who can do anything. I mean, you see the ads. The Marine ads isn't like get money for college and play basketball. It's like some guy slaying a dragon. I mean, it's different. And all branches are wonderful, but I'm biased to mine. Marines are different. They join because the ad said you probably aren't tough enough, you probably can't do it, but if you think you can, join, and they do it. And then we ask that same Marine to self-admit they have a disorder. Now, Marines are proud of their injuries. I will tell you, I've had 11 arthroscopic surgeries on my lower body, and I did the Ironman 2 years ago. I'm proud of that. If it was socially acceptable, I'd show you the scars. But it's not. But I have an injury because you get injured, you treat my injury, and I come back stronger. So if we would call it combat stress injury, if we would just change the name, more Marines are like, combat? Yeah, I was in combat. Stress injury? Yeah, I got that. Absolutely. And you know what? I'm going to get treated, and I'm going to come back stronger because there's nothing wrong with me. I don't have a disorder. I have an injury. And I just think that there's something in terms of how we talk about these things that we have to do. And there's a raging debate about do you award Purple Hearts for these types of issues or not. And those who remain in elected office can carry on that debate. I'll tell you, a friend of mine suffers from TBI, traumatic brain injury. We were a two-man team in Iraq. We went out together every single day, and we got hit hard on multiple occasions. Grace of God, I came back and was fine. He did not. Since we came back in 2005, this smart, athletic, dedicated man has not been able to walk. He has balance issues. He's gained between 150 and 200 pounds, and he's not able to hold down employment. A college graduate, a smart, leaning forward in life guy. Now, I don't know. If someone doesn't want to give him a Purple Heart for his injuries, they can try and explain that to me. But I do think we have to continue to push the envelope in terms of recognizing these for what they are and treating them. And you know what? If 1 out of every 20 is faking it, okay, that's fine. Because the other 19 that we catch and treat properly are the ones that I think we should. I made a couple notes on things that may or may not help you as you encounter some of these student veterans. One of them is help them apply their skills. You know, it's difficult. I talk now to a lot of business leaders who will look at the resume of a veteran and they won't see how that infantry experience helps them. You know, I mean, you know, how does that apply to my company? And I remember telling one of them, a friend of mine who's in technology, I said, I'll never forget watching a 20-year-old Navy corpsman do a full tracheotomy on a guy in a ditch while RPGs were sailing over his head and there were 4 machine guns shooting at him. I mean, a full trach, right in the throat. Saved his life. I said, if you hire that kid, he's not going to freak out if the email server goes down. He'll be all right. He's got it under control. I would routinely get on calls with my staff when I was in the assembly, and everyone was freaking out. They said, there's a crisis, and I said, okay. I said, how many people are dead? How many Humvees are on fire? Are you taking mortars and small arms? How many people are bleeding out of their ears? Because that's a crisis. And you know what? When we were there, we didn't freak out. We didn't yell and scream. We looked at all the information. We said, what are the options? We made the best possible decision with the information we had. As that information changed, then we revisited the decision that we had made. There are tremendous skills that these veterans bring that are difficult to see on a resume. And you can help them with that. You can help them identify careers and courses and areas of interest. You can ask them, what experience did you have? What did you do in the military? And give them a sense of purpose that comes over. The other thing you can help them with, and this is a difficult thing to quantify. I had a lot of frustration with a lot of the private contracting in war zones. Because there's something different when you're a Marine and you're there. You're there for service, you're there for country, you're there for your fellow service members. You're not there for money. You know, for us it was Operation Enduring Freedom. For contractors it was Operation Enduring Per Diem. It's different. It's different. And even if you take someone out of the military and you put them in that other environment, when you're there for profit, it's different. And so when you take those veterans and they come back, they know service, they know commitment, they know teamwork. Right? And then we go, okay, well, you're going to be a business major, and you're going to go, well, sometimes it's hard. So help them find some outlet or some entity where they have that sense of purpose. Help them find some charitable cause, help them find some good organization, help them find something where they get that sense of service before self, and they get to feel like they're a part of it. I've been pushing a lot of the younger veterans to come back and run for office. Right? I don't even care what party you are. I don't care. Because there's an experience. I had an experience that I will never forget. Actually, I'm going to save that for the end because that's part of my close. If I forget to tell you about the World War II veteran, one of you guys tell me that. Help them find a passion in a team. It's different. Okay, put them in touch with people that can help them. So a lot of campuses are doing this and doing it very well. They aren't going to talk to you about what they went through. But that's okay. They'll talk to someone. Just make sure they get hooked up with the right person. Make sure that the services that are there are available. Make sure people know where they are. Make sure they know how to access it. Make sure they know how to access it anonymously. And make sure that your campuses and your schools do a good job of that. The last 2 points, in the military, we lead a very structured life. You get up, you get dressed, you cut your hair, you work out, you do all these types of things. It's very structured, it's very orderly, it's very disciplined, and there's a comfort that comes from that. One of the most successful programs at getting people off the streets from being homeless is in San Diego, Veterans Village of San Diego, where they bring homeless people who are veterans, and they said at one point you had structure in your life, so they just bring that structure back. And it's amazing. They get back on track. They have a phenomenal success rate. To the extent you can help the veterans in your program have structure, because college life is maybe a little bit less unstructured, to the extent you can create that as much as possible for them, that'll be a good thing. Your classes, your assignment, the reading assignment, what's expected, lay it all out for them. They're really good at executing a plan, but help them develop that plan. They may need a little bit of help there. And then finally, make sure that they can spend time with other veterans. And again, I know a lot of places are doing this wonderfully, but student veteran organizations are really good. And it can be as grand and ambitious as a conference room that there's a couple pizzas in that all the vets go to hang out once a week. Because they'll tell their stories. And they'll be back and they'll be comfortable. They'll be comfortable. They'll be with each other. They'll be with people who served. We do a lot of programs in San Diego where we actually bring in old Vietnam and Korea guys and have them all just put them in a room and let them go. They'll take care of the rest. They'll take care of the counseling and the asking questions, and they'll sit there and they'll say, you know, think about a 23-year-old veteran who did 6 combat deployments in 3 different countries who's sitting next to an 18-year-old kid from Carlsbad. They're fundamentally different people. Fundamentally, and they're in your class talking about politics. They're different. So let them get with the other veteran and let them complain and moan about that. But also let them talk. Hey, how are you handling this? How are you handling that? Hey, what about this issue? What about that issue? Having that ability on your campus where they get together. And that will also show it is very powerful when the leadership of the institutions convey to the veterans, hey, you are important to us. You're an important part of our institution. You're an important part of our college, of our system. We value you, and we want you to tell us what you need to be successful. I know in San Diego, I was always really proud of Dr. Weber at San Diego State, who really made this a priority early on. And it makes a real difference. You see veterans flocking there because they all talk. And each of you can do that. I want to close, and then I'd be happy to take any questions with a couple stories that I think are reasons that should give you some hope. You know, a lot of this conversation and topic is very kind of down. It's not always an uplifting topic because we're dealing with weighty, difficult, heavy issues. But I think that there are a lot of reasons that we should be encouraged. I was at an event in the campaign, and David Brooks with the New York Times had written an entire column about my candidacy for office, and it was wonderful. It was very nice. And I had a World War II veteran who came up to me at the end of the event, and he had cut out the column out of the New York Times, and he gave it to me. And he had his little hat on. He was really cute. And it was about 9:30 at night, and he said, "You're us." And I said, "Well, you're us. I don't know. I'm not tracking the pronouns here. I'm tired. I don't understand." I said, "Well, you know, what do you mean?" And he said, "You're our generation." And I said, "Well, no, we didn't make nearly the sacrifice that you made, and we didn't go in nearly the numbers that you went." And I knew I was coming home at the end of my deployment. It wasn't like we were at risk of losing the war. You had it much greater. He goes, no. He said, "We went to war, and we didn't care what party you were. We didn't care. We just knew that we had a higher sense of purpose. We had a greater sense of service. We had a greater understanding of what our country stands for." And he said, when that war was over, we rebuilt Europe. And then we came home and we rebuilt America. We built the middle class in this country. We built the manufacturing base that sustained us to be the greatest power in the world. And we had disagreements and we had issues, but we didn't treat each other horribly. We didn't call each other names. We just figured out how to make it work. And he said there's something that comes of generations that go to war that makes them special. And it was one of the most touching compliments I had got, and it was kind of filtering in my head. And then I was at an event at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar not too long after that. And the general there was speaking, and there had been a plane that landed at Miramar that had a couple wounded Marines on it. And the general was there visiting. They said, "Hey, would you like to go out and greet the Marines?" And he said, "Sure." And so he walks out onto the plane. Now, when I was in the Marine Corps, we used to joke, if a general ever asked you, "What can I do for you? Is there anything I can do?" "Hey, I'm ready. I got my ask." I actually used to carry the next higher rank in my pocket, just in case a general said, "Is there anything?" "Yes, sir, I'd like to be a staff sergeant." All right? But you knew what you wanted. You wanted base housing. You wanted to go to jump school. But you knew. And they could make it happen. And every now and then a general would say, "Hey, you did a great thing. Anything I can do for you, son?" "All right, yes, sir. Here's what I want." So the general walks on the plane, and there's a 19-year-old Marine Corps Lance Corporal who had been wounded throughout his legs and his back, and he was laid out on a stretcher. And the general said, "Is there anything I can do for you, son? Anything at all?" And this 19-year-old Marine said, "Yes, sir." And the general said, "Well, you name it, son, whatever you want." And the kid said, "Help me walk off the plane." The general said, "What?" The kid goes, "That doctor over there keeps saying I can't walk." He said, "But my family's here. They're out there. My buddies are out there. I don't want my family to think I'm hurt, but I don't want my buddies to have any doubt that I'll be making a full return, and recovery. And I want you to help me walk off this plane. And the general said, well, son, if the doctor said, and this 19-year-old kid goes, no, sir, you said anything I want. And this is what I want. And the general leaned over and picked him up, and he helped that Marine walk off the plane. That kid was in the second grade on September 11th. Second grade. He joined knowing exactly what he was signing up for. And the general said the Marines of today are smarter and stronger and more committed than any Marines in history. He said they are an exceptional generation, an all-volunteer force that has done amazing things. And as these veterans come back, we're going to have to deal with their mental health issues. We're going to have to deal with their physical issues. We're going to have to deal with a whole host of issues. But out of this comes an exceptional group of people. And my final story for you tonight, this afternoon, I would tell you, is one I haven't told in a while, but I talked to his mom recently, and she reminded me I'd promised to tell Jason's story as much as possible. And so I'll close today with the story of Jason Dunham. Jason Dunham was a 22-year-old high school star athlete. He was from a small rural town in upstate New York. Jason was the eldest of four. He had three younger siblings, and his life goal was to serve as a Marine and then return to his home to be near his family, and he wanted to go into law enforcement. Jason Dunham, on paper, was the model Marine. He had a square jaw, he had clear eyes, he was lean, he was strong, he was athletic. He was every recruiter's poster. He joined the Marines. He became a machine gunner with Company K, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marine, stationed at 29 Palms, out east of Los Angeles. In early 2004, his time in the Marine Corps was over. He had completed his service. He had deployed once overseas, and he had the ability to get out. But his unit was going back to Iraq. And Jason told his mom, Deb, that he felt like he needed to continue to serve, that it wasn't fair for his friends to do another deployment and go back and him not to go back. He believed in the mission, he believed in what they were doing, and he voluntarily extended his time in service. Jason was assigned duty. I didn't know him. We were in the exact same area in the Al Anbar province of Iraq in 2004. And it was on April 14th of 2004 that Corporal Jason Dunham was on patrol when they encountered a suspicious Iraqi vehicle. Jason Dunham moved ahead of his folks to approach the vehicle. And as he got close, a terrorist in a black jumpsuit lunged from the back of the vehicle, grabbed him by his throat. Jason Dunham and the terrorist fell to the ground wrestling. The other three Marines, in the Marine Corps, you have a four-man fire team. The other three Marines who were with him started rushing to try and help him in his struggle. And they heard Jason Dunham yell out a warning. He said, look out, he's got a grenade. Get back. He's got a grenade. As he said this, the terrorist released the explosive device, activating a very short timer. Jason Dunham didn't do a cost-benefit analysis. He didn't make a risk versus reward chart. He didn't weigh the pros and the cons. He didn't think about coming home. He didn't think about his high school sweetheart. He didn't think about opening day at the ballpark. He thought about his fellow Marines. And the 22-year-old Marine thrust his body on top of the grenade, taking the full force of the explosion in his chest and head. As the smoke cleared, the three Marines whose lives had been saved by his warning rushed to his side to try and administer first aid. He was unconscious. Jason Dunham never regained consciousness. 8 days later, at Bethesda Naval Hospital, with his parents Deb and Dan Dunham at his side holding his hands, and moments after the Commandant of the Marine Corps awarded him the Purple Heart, Jason Dunham died. On January 7th, 3 years later, Corporal Dunham was awarded the Medal of Honor, our nation's highest military honor. There was an article in the American Legion magazine that summed up the life of Jason Dunham as a Marine, he was taught that honor, courage, and commitment are not just words. They're core values for a way of life that elevates service above self. He was taught that while America's founding truths are self-evident, they must be defended by good men and women willing to stand up to determined enemies. On a dusty road in western Iraq, Jason Dunham gave his life so that his friends could live, so that they could come home. He understands that while freedom's not free, there is a cost to be paid for it and a cost associated with it. I've become close with Jason's mother, Deb Dunham, and she asked me to tell the story of Jason as often as I can for two reasons. One, so that people will better understand the tremendous sacrifice and the very real and personal toll, but also to understand that while not every Marine jumped on a grenade, every Marine and every veteran carries with them something special. And that's a willingness to make tremendous sacrifice. It's a willingness to go in harm's way. It's a belief in something bigger than themselves. And while none of you will ever have Jason Dunham sitting in your classroom, you will have a lot of veterans who carry his spirit. And I hope you will appreciate that. I hope you will help guide that. I hope you will be patient with that, because it's not always easy. And by doing that, you're doing a tremendous service not only to that veteran, but to my two young boys who will see your example of leadership and caring. Thank you very, very much for letting me join you this afternoon. I appreciate it tremendously. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I would be, we have a few minutes. I'd be happy to take any questions if anyone has any. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
And I have with me here today two of my vets who work study, Kelly and John, and two of my wonderful colleagues, Colin and Terrence, and a new woman combat vet I just
Nice.
shared tears with about an hour ago. Sharing my military sexual trauma that I had. And
Right.
she pulled down her shirt and clothes and showed me where she got hit with shrapnel. And she's also a veterans counselor. And it was because of an event like this, where I'm constantly advocating, constantly doing presentations, constantly, so driving people crazy, bringing these issues up. And
Yeah.
my nickname is PIA, pain in the ass. So because of what you said, it's like, oh my God, yes, 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 about what these men and women are willing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not a combat vet, but my guys know I take a bullet for them in a heartbeat. And
Yeah.
we just went on a go run with about 12 of us. Like I said, I'm proud of it and
Yeah.
what we accomplished. But reason why I'm getting to is, from what I gathered today, is realizing about women veteran issues.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually did a panel today, myself and Kelly and Lindsay and Evelina. And a lot of issues kind of came up where, we're kind of in the gray area trying to figure out where we fit.
Mm-hmm.
And we realized because as a woman in the military, it's really difficult to figure out where we fit and where we matter.
Right.
And I realized even as a vet counselor myself, I minimize. I've never filed that. Oh, thank you. I can talk loud. I'm a Marine if we need to. But, I minimized the things that happened to me and never
Sure.
filed a claim, after 30 years because I need to take care of, I got 600 vets in my campus. And,
Right.
and Crystal was kind of saying the same thing. She minimized so much of what happened to her and the trauma she went through. And that's very prevalent amongst women veterans. And so what we came up with today, the idea of we women vets want to we're kinesthetic, we want to do fun, physical things, and so we're trying to put together some kind of a mud, you guys help me out with the words, I always, mud mucker? Mud? Oh, tough
Oh, yeah.
mud, or
Yeah,
some
those are
kind
fun.
of
I've done this.
event where we want to gather women veterans
Yeah.
from all over and let's get some t-shirts made, let's run the streets of Sacramento, do an obstacle course or
Right.
something. But of course, to be able to do that, it's going to take some some support and to make that happen. But I feel like if we could start that and get, and let it be led by vets, because like you said, when you get a room full of vets, we know what
they
we
get
need.
it, yeah. Well, and the issues of kind of women in combat, I think just recently, honestly, have kind of started to get an airing. And there's cultural difficulties. Every institutions go through evolutions. And what's amazing is that when you identify a problem, when you say it has to be fixed. Now, I think we've been a little slow in identifying this one and saying it has to be fixed. But the military is very adaptable. I mean, the military led the way in the civil rights movement and integration. I mean, well before anyone else did. And you know what? They figured it out, and it just worked. They made it work. Because at the end of the day, veterans in the military, you do what you're told. And so when you're told, this is absolutely unacceptable, treatment of women, when you're told these things, you can do it, it has to be a priority. Another area where I think the military has led, and I took a lot of grief on this personally, but I was in California, the first combat veteran in the Marine Corps to come out and say, don't ask, don't tell, doesn't make sense. It's not a policy, in my opinion, respect if we disagree, but it's not a policy that makes sense. Because as a Marine, we talk about honor, courage, and commitment, and then we put in a policy where we tell you have to lie about who you are. Now, how are those two in any way compatible? And I served with Marines that I knew were gay, and they were great Marines. And so it was amazing. So the policy changes, and all the branches complain. The Marines complained the most. The Commandant said, this is the worst thing ever. It'll destroy combat effectiveness. We'll have all of these problems and issues. And then you know what happened? Nothing. Nothing happened. Because everyone got up, and the Commandant had to come back a year later and acknowledge, okay, maybe I got that one wrong. Marines were more adaptable when we said, this is what you're going to do. And so I think as it relates to women's issues, we got to have that same focus. So.
Well, and what I would ask, maybe that we could get your support to try, maybe like in March, which is Women Veterans Month, to get the support and help to put together some kind of a fun run where we can invite women and then be able to spread it out through, and then ask the male veterans to come along the side and rally us on.
Sure.
And that one.
Yeah, I'll
so
give you my email.
That would be
when we're done.
my request
Yeah,
to you
if
if
we
you'd be
can
able
help.
to.
Happy.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't know how much time I have. Maybe one more, if there's any. None? Nope. All right. Well, hey, thank you very much for having me join you today. I appreciate it tremendously. Thank you.